Now this is interesting, and the ABC did a story on this over the weekend. You got migrants in Fairfield and Mount Druitt voting for a party whose leader said 30 years ago that we're in danger of being swamped by Asians, and then a couple of decades ago she said we're in danger of being swamped by Muslims, right? Now, put aside whether you agree with what she said, okay? Migrants voted for her. They voted for One Nation. Why is that? Well, I'll tell you why. Because they thought that, well, this woman and her party will do a better job of protecting our religious freedom than either of the majors. Okay, so, and I can tell you, having worked in those electorates and working with people, that was a big factor in the shift of those votes. And I'll tell you what a lot of people in the Middle East tell me. Okay, they told me that, you know what, we left that country because we were persecuted by the sword. We've now come here and now we're persecuted by the law. Okay, so we've gone from warfare to lawfare. Okay, now let's talk about some fundamental politics. Basically, the government doesn't want a long drawn-out debate. They want this issue to go away. Okay, they want it off the agenda as quick as possible. They want bipartisan support, but there's a fundamental problem now, because both parties can't satisfy the LGBT lobby and the religious lobby at the same time, because when you've got demands that are mutually exclusive, do you follow? Do everyone know what I mean by that term? Mutually exclusive. One wants black, one wants white. The guy who wants black doesn't want white. The guy who wants white doesn't want black. You can't give them grey because they want black and they want white. You follow? So basically what MPs now, what they have is they've got in one ear, they've got religious groups yelling that they want religious freedoms laws to give them greater protection. And in the other ear, they've got the gay lobby yelling, telling them that, no, we don't want to give them those laws. All right? So that puts them, and because it's about religious freedom, I'm going to quote a few texts here. If you indulge that. Jesus actually said in one of the Gospels, actually Gospel of Luke, he said, no servant can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. So, we've now got a far more complicated problem for the government to solve. So instead of fixing this 2 years ago, when they should have, that we now have to try and unscramble the egg. And I'm going to give you a fact that I know that in the last couple of weeks, both Sunni and Shia, because I'm working closely with those communities, have had meetings with the opposition, okay, the Labor Party. And I'll paraphrase. This is what they said to senior members of the Labor Party. So, when I tell you this, you know, this should be like a, wow, Muslim people are saying this to Labor. You guys, what was said is, oh, Labor is the party for your community. Their response was, you care more about gays and lesbians than you do about our community. Okay, you're going to have to choose. Either you're going to look after our community or you're going to look after them, but you can't do both. So, yeah, well, that's it. You know, one of the reasons I really do like my Islamic brothers is they're hardcore, and because why should you be wishy-washy? I mean, correct? You know, we all should be hardcore about what we believe. Why be wishy-washy? We're in this mess because everybody's wishy-washy. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is get you to be hardcore about your beliefs, whatever they are. You don't have to believe what I believe, but believe something, for crying out loud. Okay? So, got to be carried away. So now what that's led to is that both parties are now between a rock and a hard place. And I'll quote my esteemed co-speaker. Ricardo called it in our phone conversation a week ago. He said, "That's a big wedge." I said, "Yes, it is. They've got the big wedge." Some fundamentals of rights. There are two kinds of rights, basically. You've got positive rights and negative rights. Okay, a positive right defines what you can do. All right, it says you can do this or you can do that. A negative right talks about what can be done to you. And anti-discrimination laws are an example of negative rights. They talk about what can't be done to you. And there are certain exemptions in those laws that sort of define, that say what you can do. The same-sex marriage law was an example of a positive right. It gave same-sex couples the positive right to marry. Does everyone follow the difference? Now, the problem is positive rights usually trump negative rights in any court battle. It's like any conflict. Who wins a fight? Usually, a war. Ricardo, correct? The person with the biggest gun, usually. Okay, bigger gun usually better than a smaller gun, correct? So we now have a fundamental conflict because the federal government has given the positive right to one group of people to practice something that the Holy Scriptures of the two biggest religions in the world, that is Islam and Christianity, call an abomination. Okay, now you can throw rocks at me for saying that if you want to, but that's what the Bible says homosexuality is, and that's what the Quran says it is. Whether you agree with those scriptures or not is not relevant. That's what they say. Okay, so you've got, because everyone see the problem we've got? This group has the positive right to do something that this group, their scriptures say is abhorrent. That's a recipe for trouble. Okay, if I've ever seen one. Now, I know that there might be some, you might say, oh yeah, aren't there scholars that say that the Bible doesn't condemn homosexuality? No, they're in the minority. None of the serious Christian or Muslim scholars will say anything other than, I'm sorry, but the Quran and the Bible do not support it. And so, whether you agree with those scriptures or not, those scriptures define the identity for many practicing Christians, Jews and Muslims. Okay? And collectively, there are about 3 billion people around the world. Okay? So, you have to take that into account, unfortunately. And if 70% of Australia is still religious, according to the census, okay, and 50% of the country is still Christian, according to the census, you're going to ignore the rights and the identity of half the country. You're asking for trouble. Now, why I give you that is hopefully you don't see any surprise then as to why so many Christians and Muslims actually funded Israel Folau's fees. I know that one Shia community in Sydney, they gave $80,000 to his campaign. Why is that? Because they see that they could be, that there but for the grace of whoever they believe in, could be them. Does everyone follow that? The federal bill. Okay, we talked about that exposure draft. Okay, I've actually done a pretty detailed analysis of it, and if anybody wants it later, I can give it to you. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to have a bet each way. Okay, a bit of this and a bit of that. They're trying to give something to either side, hoping, give this dog a bone, give this dog a bone, and hopefully both dogs will shut up. All right? It's not going to work because there are a number of problems with the bill. Number one, it's not clear. It doesn't define key terms. It says lawful religious activity, but it doesn't say what's lawful. It doesn't say what religious activity is, and it doesn't define terms like vilify. Okay, it's like, for example, lawful. What if the council makes a bylaw that says you can't pray in this area? Then that's unlawful then, according to that bill, right? It doesn't define what's unjustifiable financial hardship. So that's a big problem. It's not consistent. It actually says that if your employer earns more than $50 million, you get one level of protection, and if they earn less than $50 million, you get another level of protection. So how does that work? Why should your freedom or your protections be dependent on what your employer earns? Okay? It doesn't override state laws. It says that, conscientious objectors have, this is what you can do if there's no state law, but if there's a state law, then that state law applies. And so I'm glad I don't practice in Victoria, because in Victoria, if someone came to me and they wanted an abortion, right, and I said, no, I'm not going to give you that, I'm legally required to refer them, even if I don't believe in it. And there's a doctor named Andrew Hobart who said he wouldn't do that, and he's been before their tribunals and authorities because of that. Okay, it's not complete. It doesn't cover things like nursing homes. It doesn't cover conscientious objections. It doesn't cover parental rights. It doesn't talk about parents who want to withdraw their children from safe schools type material. So it doesn't cover any of that. Okay, so it needs a whole lot of work, and I'm submitting that we need to take our time. Okay, we need to not rush this, because that's what got us into this mess. And anybody that's here has the opportunity to talk to a federal member, government or opposition, or in the Senate, you need to tell them, slow down. Slow down. They want to rush this through by the end of the year. We don't want that. Okay, it's too important, as Ricardo said. It's far too important to rush. Okay, Ricardo's defined religion. I want to talk about freedom now. Okay, what is true freedom? Well, you can't have real freedom unless you have freedom of action, correct? Okay, but your actions come from your thoughts, so you have to have freedom of thought. And your thoughts come from your beliefs. So therefore, without freedom of belief, you actually don't have freedom. Now, your belief could be, I have no belief, I'm an atheist, that's fine. But you have to be free to hold that belief. Just like the theist has to be free to hold their belief, or the Muslim has to be free to hold their belief, or you want to believe in the flying spaghetti monster, that's fine. You've got to be free to hold that belief. All right? Now, then let's talk about some fundamentals of identity, because, okay, anyone here ever heard the term identity politics?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. Okay, your identity. It's all about identity and inclusion, isn't it? Isn't that right? So, isn't that what university is about? Identity and inclusion? Okay, well, for a religious person, their religious beliefs define who they are. That's their identity. Okay, so if you're going to be inclusive about identity, you have to include people of religious belief. And you have to accept their religious belief. Otherwise, you're not including them.